Well, thank you, Richard, and thank you very much, Linda, for a wonderful talk this morning. I'm an educator by background, so that means two things. One, I can't deal without PowerPoints. And secondly, I can only actually deal with 3 ideas at one time. So the 3 ideas I want to put forward this morning is that not everything can be reduced to competencies, and that competence is more than the sum of competencies, and it's also not a single event. So let's deal with the first one then. Not everything can be reduced to competencies. And here I'm indebted to the writings of an English educational writer, Lawrence Stenhouse, who said, education has 4 functions: training, instruction, induction and initiation. And in fact, if we think about training and instruction, that is acquiring the knowledge and skills that you need for practice, a lot of that can be written in terms of measurable, observable competencies. But once you sort of move out of that into induction, which is about thinking, problem solving, and once you move into the area of initiation, it gets much more difficult to think about measurable, observable competencies. And initiation is the very area that we're thinking about today, because there we're thinking about character, to be, formation of professional identity. These things are not easily amenable to observable measurements. They're complex and they're unpredictable. So can we actually write competencies those areas? And perhaps to get another hold on this is to look at the idea of competence is more than the sum of competencies. I'm very pleased to see Linda referring to now hybrid approaches and not going down a time-based approach. Because one of the things we do know is that there's plenty of evidence to show that clinical reasoning develops with experience. So it's not a matter of ticking off a competency and moving on. You actually need that experience. And you need experience in different contexts. Because again, we know that a lot of our learning is context-specific. There is no generic problem solving that transfers from one context to another. You need to know things in context. And the third important point in this area comes out of a paper that the Australian Medical Council produced back in 2010. And that's the idea that a lot of training to be a medical professional involves a great deal of tacit knowledge. Knowledge that's not written down, that's not directly observable all the time, but is very much part of being a professional. So in that area of tacit knowledge falls our values, our life course, our trust, judgment, reflection, all those things that we've been talking about this morning. And yet they're slippery, they're difficult. It's very difficult to get a handle on them. Now, I don't want to give the impression that you can't teach them or you can't learn them, because in fact they're learned every day. And there's a potential for a lot of negative tacit knowledge to come out in the process. So what we really need to do is to understand how tacit knowledge is acquired and make sure we can marshal it to develop the sort of professionals we want and ensure that it's addressed. And we mightn't get there by trying to write it as an observable competency. The last thing we need to do is we need to assess it. And I like this slide because I can show off my family photos. But I think if we're talking about assessing professionalism, it's not a single event. It's not something you get a tick for and then you move forward. It's a constant process. And that's where I'm attracted to the idea of programmatic assessment, which has come out of the work of Kees van der Vleuten and Lambert Schuworth of Maastricht University, although I can now say with great pride that Lambert Schuworth of Flinders University. But they had the notion of assessment must be a program. And so to me, it's like my family photo album. In that, you've got some nice kind of studio portraits of everybody in their best clothes. You've got some small and very difficult to read photographs. You've got some casual photographs, and you've got some new additions to the family and my 2 granddaughters down the bottom. And that really represents the way we are with assessment, that what we should be looking as using a variety of assessment methods to assess a professionalism in an ongoing capacity throughout a doctor's career. The problem we face with assessing professionalism, we haven't got too many of the high quality studio portraits. As yet, we haven't really got very valid and very reliable ways of assessing professionalism in the same way as we have for assessing knowledge, for example. So that's an area we need to work on, more studio portraits. But in the meantime, we've got to make use of the other tools that we have at our disposal and some of the newer tools that I talked about this morning. So I guess that's where I finish. If we're looking at competence and competencies, and we're looking at professionalism, it's not easy to reduce it down to competencies. We need to think about it being complex and unpredictable, but we need to find ways to continually assess it throughout a doctor's whole career. Thank you.